everyone. Thanks all for coming. My name's Danielle. I am the assistant director up at Oceanside Museum of Art, where I welcome everyone to come visit sometime. And I'm so excited to be here tonight. I want to thank Alessandra for this wonderful opportunity to guest curate the show. And also, this is a wonderful show to curate because there are so many people involved. As you know, curating involves collectors, it involves artists, and in this case, I want to thank Perry and Kathy Meyer for all their assistance, of course, and all the students at UCSD. I did have some help with some curatorial research. Any of the UCSD students here? No? Okay. Oh well. So I wanted to start off with Romero's photograph. Did you guys see his photograph? So there's a little biography over there in the corner, and if you haven't had the chance to read it, he is from Mexico City, and he couldn't be here tonight, unfortunately. And I don't think he'd give a very good tour because he speaks Spanish. He doesn't speak English, so it might have been a little tough for you guys to understand. But he did want me to reflect that he's very honored to have this exhibition, so thank you, Alessandra. And Romero grew up in Mexico City, in a small area called Coyoacan, which is near the Blue House where Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo lived. You all may be familiar with them. And you'll see some references to their work later in the show. So he grew up there and was surrounded by a family of artists. His father is an architect and actually studied with Diego Rivera. And his mother studied art history. His brothers are both architects. And his sister studied film. So he grew up in a very artistic family, which I think has a lot to do with his life. And you'll see in the photograph over there, he's in his studio. And just to give you guys a little background about him, he has a huge collection of comic books, as you can see from some of the imagery in his work, and vintage toys and superhero characters. So all of this memorabilia that he collects, he utilizes in his paintings, as you can see from a lot of the iconography in his work. So he received a classical education at the National School of Painting, Printmaking, and Sculpture called La Esmeralda in Mexico City. And he did represent Mexico in the Emerging Artists in an exhibition in Paris that he did in 1998. And also studied in New York City for a bit. But he never learned the language. Instead, he liked to kind of read the visual world around him. And you can see he likes to incorporate a lot of graffiti and street art. He kind of defaces a lot of his work. So I'll talk about the process a little bit later. And he finds a lot of inspiration from the world around him, as you can see. A lot of his work stems from his interest in the TV programs that he watched in the 60s and 70s, and the comic books he read, you know, Batman and Robin, and Lost in Space. You may have seen that television show back in the day. And he's also really interested in art history. A lot of his works parody art historical pieces. Like that piece over there is a painting of Diego Rivera's Sunday in Alameda Park, which I'll discuss a little bit later. So his process involves kind of a representational image in the background. So he's parodying something that he's already seen, and then works from there and works off of that. He's also interested in science and literature and film and, of course, pop culture. And he has a really interesting way of blending Mexican culture, American culture, and European culture in his work, which you can see through the visual icons in his work. And in the 1980s, when Romero developed his style, there was really kind of a cultural divide between highbrow and lowbrow art. You may know that lowbrow art is the art of comic books, graffiti, street art, pop culture. And highbrow art is more fine art, indicative of a Monet or a Picasso. So as you may know, though, that cultural divide has really vanished with the growth of pop art, appropriation, and assemblage, and graffiti. So he's really merging the past with the present in his work as a kind of mirror of contemporary culture. So you'll see a lot of references to contemporary culture, pop culture in his work. And he really breaks the traditions, the art historical canons in his work. And he's not really, he doesn't really fit in one category. He's not representational. He's not just pop art. I like to call his style kind of a highbrow vandalism style, which is a really interesting merging of the two. And the first piece I want to talk about is the Malas Amistades. Did you all see that one over there with the pigs dressed as bees, which is kind of an interesting, humorous piece. A lot of his work has, as you can see, very, very funny, kind of tongue-in-cheek to a lot of his work. And the characters sitting around the table all appear to be friends, don't they? Or do they? His work is very complex. And the character that we can recognize on the left-hand side with the glasses, do y'all see him? So that is Jean-Paul Sartre, French existentialist philosopher. And the presence of Sartre really reflects Romero's interest in his philosophies, and which are very complex. And I could go on about them, but I might lose you all. So we'll keep going. I think what's interesting about it is how some of Sartre's theories are reflected in the message that Romero's trying to say here, in that he's used the pigs here, dressed as bees, to parody how people that might act like your friends really aren't your friends, and that they'll sting you in the back any chance they get. So these pigs are pretending to be bees, just as a friend of yours might be pretending to be your friend, but in order to get ahead, they would sting you, and just to get ahead in life. So kind of an interesting play on imagery and messages in that one. And then moving from flying pigs into the Amazing Animals series. Did you guys see these three pieces here? Kind of fun collection of work. And these are loosely based on a children's book. You may have seen one of those children's books that's broken in three pieces. So the top part are heads of animals and people. And the middle part is the torso of animals and people and figures. And then the bottom is the feet. So, a child can mix and match and create any kind of animal, human they want to create. So he's loosely based these images on that concept, as well as a concept from André Breton, a French surrealist, who also used this technique in 1925 in some of his drawings. So they have a very surreal, kind of playful quality to them. And I think they really kind of bring to mind a lot of questions about genetics and crossbreeding. There's so many different kinds of dogs out there these days that kind of made me think of my puggles, a pug and a beagle, the little mix of any kind of creature that science can create. The power of science is really endless. And in the foreground, you'll see a lot of clowns that he's used to kind of create that circus-like quality, as if these hybrid animals, are part of a freak circus show. So, kind of interesting work there. And we'll move on to the superheroes piece. This one here, as you can see, is just loaded with superheroes, references to the television programs he would watch, like Lost in Space, and all sorts of figures. And as I said, Romero collects. He has a huge collection of characters from like Batman and Robin and the Green Flash. And he's also interested in lucha libres, as you can see here. This one here, kind of interesting concept of the rivalry and that superheroes have. There's always a good character and a bad character. And it kind of mimics daily life and how you're constantly choosing between good and bad and fighting and that constant struggle that people have in life. And this one here, I'll talk about his process a little bit. If you get up close, you'll see that he's kind of sewn the canvas together here. And he really wants to create that distressed look in his work to kind of mimic what he sees out his window in Mexico City. There's a lot of graffiti in Mexico City. So you'll see that he really takes the time to distress his canvases. And he really starts off with the concept of a large painting. As you can see in the background of all of his pieces, there's, you know, a bigger, larger figure in the background, and then he comes on top of it and paints these pseudo stickers. So please don't touch them because they're really not stickers. They're all painted on there. And part of his process is also to draw on top with some chalk. So you'll see these kind of crude characters, and sometimes you'll see textual graffiti that relates to the message in the piece. And kind of interesting combination of the past with the present and pop culture references in that one. And this one over here is based on a Diego Rivera painting. You may have seen it before. Alameda, Sunday in Alameda Park. And this piece is called The Photographer. And it kind of goes back to the days when Romero was a portrait painter. He started off as a portrait painter. And when he was out and about, he saw this photographer taking photographs of a family in front of this Diego Rivera painting, which is in the Prado in Mexico City. And it got Romero thinking about how often artists parody other artists. They mimic them, they copy them constantly in their work. And so that had a big influence on Romero, because as you can see, he's borrowing a lot of his images from other artists or from pop culture. And that's the foundation of his style. So at the core of this one is really the importance of family and cultural history. Some of the characters in here, you see Jose Posada right here. Some of you may know him for popularizing the image of the calaveras, or the skeleton, in his political cartoons in the early 1900s. Also, you see Frida Kahlo here, holding the Chinese philosophy symbol yin and yang, which also relates back to pre-Columbian mythology. And so this nondescriptive family juxtaposed with the historical painting is really kind of a homage to Mexican culture, identity, and history, and how, you know, people should be proud of their history and where they come from. And the next piece is also based on a famous painting by Harmonious Bosch. You all may be familiar with his work. This is a really fun one that's kind of a spoof on psychoanalysis. And the painting is based on a piece by Bosch called The Extraction of the Stone Madness, which is really interesting. In the 1400s, there was this theory that you could have this stone taken out of your forehead and it would stop you from being stupid. But thankfully, it was really only something that, it was a myth. You know, it didn't really happen. So Freud, as you all know, is the father of psychoanalysis. You see Freud here in the white coat there with this apparatus that's supposed to be helping him analyze this person's dreams and help him read the dreams. And this character here is Alfred Hitchcock, who is known for his films that involve psychoanalytic themes. And you see he has a book on his head here, and that also references back to the Bosch painting, where a nun was wearing a book on her head. And back in the 1400s, people would wear amulets that looked like books. And these amulets would hope to instill on those people the knowledge of that book that they wore. So here, Hitchcock, I believe, is wearing a book about science on his head to maybe help to instill him with the knowledge of science so he can help Freud analyze this person's dreams. But it's really kind of a spoof on psychoanalysis because, as you may know, psychoanalysis has been called a pseudoscience because there's really no way to quantify, you know, how to read someone's dreams, and there's really no empirical evidence, and it doesn't really adhere to a scientific methodology. So you can see, very humorously, he's poking fun at psychoanalysis and kind of spoofing it. And this piece over here, we'll talk about 3 more pieces. This one here is called Siamese Twins, and Romero is a big fan of the circus. He was just so thrilled when the circus came to Mexico City, and he would go all the time and loved how the circus kind of combined magic and fantasy to him, and that just really, you know, spurred a lot in his imagination. For him, this also represents the concept of an unbreakable couple. You can see the Batman and Robin iconography in this one. And to him, you know, Batman really wouldn't be Batman without Robin. Kind of like Tom and Jerry, you know, that unbreakable couple that if you lose one, you lose them both. So that one has a lot of reminders about the circus and the concept of the unbreakable couple for him. And this piece over here is based on his friend Porky, that was a wrestler, kind of a folk hero in Mexico City. Porky was Romero's friend, and he was also a butcher. So Romero and his friends would call Porky the Butcher. And this piece obviously relates to Porky's name, because of Porky Pig. But the symbols of the pig also represent how, you know, prevalent the pig is in Mexican culture, and that's what Porky would, you know, cut up as a butcher. That was the most dominant type of meat that he would cut up. So kind of an homage to his friend Porky, who doesn't wrestle anymore, unfortunately. But he was known for being very vicious in the ring. And then the last few pieces, you can see there's a series of 4 lithographs in the show. And these all relate to the history of progressive jazz. There's a lot of characters in the images, such as Duke Ellington, you all might know his name, and Buddy Bolden, and Al Ritmo. So there's a lot of characters in the pieces that tell the history and represent jazz and how important jazz is to music today. And Romero is a huge fan of jazz, so he wanted to do a series that you know, helped him research the history of jazz and using a photorealistic style to represent those characters in his work. And I want you all to remind you to look in the corner back there, behind those walls. There are a couple more pieces of the drawing class. Any of you drawing class in here tonight? But they had the chance to kind of deface a couple reproductions of Romero's famous paintings. So it's really interesting how the drawing class has kind of taken this style and really made it their own in their pieces around the corner there. So were there any questions tonight? Yes, did you have a question?
Yeah, are these paintings part of a collection? Are they all part of an ownership, or are they still part of a gallery to sell them eventually?
They're part of the gallery.
Okay.
And they are part of the 20th Century Parade collection. All the paintings are that were done.
So they're part of the collection.
Yeah, a series.
And in terms of the paint, a lot of the paint looks aged. What's the process for aging the paint and looking at not only stitchery to make it look like it's stressed, but the painting quality has a lot of wear to it. How does he do that? Artificially, or does it
That's
age?
a good question. No, he does a lot of layering with his work. And he didn't specifically tell me how he gets that process. But, you know, I would assume...
Sanding?
Yeah, sanding, exactly.
Okay.
And scratching over it. He does. Some of the pieces actually do have scratching into them, so he's used a drawing tool to really carve into the canvas.
Sometimes the Basquiat moves.
It does.
You know?
I totally relate to that Basquiat comment.
So my question is related to his question. How does he get it to look so dry? This looks like water-based tempera.
Yes, no
This
shine.
does not look like oil paint.
Right. Well,
There's no gloss.
very illustrative. You know, he's very influenced by comic books. So sometimes you see those
black-
comic book,
blackness, yes.
very much so. The characters kind of remind me of the comic book, the illustrative style.
But does he put out the oil paint and let it... How does he get the pigment to come out looking that dry? How does he mix his paint to get that quality? Do you know?
That's a good question. No, I did not.
I'll
see
have to
that.
ask.
I'm a painter, and when you use a lot of turpentine, it flattens it out
Yeah, that's
completely.
true.
Like Alex Katz does the same thing, but he still adds binders to keep the integrity, because if too much turpentine compromises the pigment.
They probably can't
But
hear.
well, they're missing someone of it. But anyway, that's how they do it.
It's a good question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a different question about over here.
Uh-huh.
So you know the painting that you said was about psychoanalysis?
Yes.
So,
Did you see something else in it?
well, yeah, I'm sure it's related to what you were saying. Are those the little figures from his childhood, his actual influences of this guy who's being psychoanalyzed? Because this is out of his time. Those are his
Exactly.
little icons of his brain in the modern world,
Right.
which leads to whatever those guys are trying to do, I thought.
Exactly.
Possibly.
That's a good
And
interpretation.
that, yeah.
Right. Yeah, all of it is kind of a personal reflection of his history and his world and the iconography and characters that he grew up with. So that's why he's kind of using them in his work.
Is the paint all oil or is it also acrylic in there? Because when I look at the stickers, it just kind of, I'm wondering if you almost like used a gloss to mix it with the paint or what exactly,
The paint.
yeah, if it's just all oil-based.
It's all oil-based paint.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it is all oil-based paint. Well, thank you all for coming. If you have any other questions, I am available, okay? Have a good night. Thanks.